I stayed like that until my mom got home. But I remember him coming in multiple times and he saw that I was bleeding and he was like changing the sheets and he was like pissed about it, you know. Then my mom finally came home. Not that she was gonna save me by any means. I remember my sister just trying to, like, hey, do you want to play? I said, get away from me. Like, I was just that upset. All I did was go to the bathroom. I didn't eat for days. Like, I was so sick to my stomach. And not only that, but it was the level of depression. I can't even describe how low I felt after that. My mom came home and, she was like, where's Erica? I could hear them talking. The house, like I said, the house was not very big. I could hear them talking. And he was like, oh, she's taking a nap. And she's like, okay. I didn't come out for dinner, and I remember her coming in and being like, hi, and giving me a kiss or whatever. And I just like turned away and I didn't say anything. They had dinner or whatever. And then I just laid in bed that whole night. And then I can't remember if it was that night or the next more. I think it felt, if I remember right, it was at night. And she started getting pissed because she's like, it wasn't like me to be like that. I was that kid that wanted to be out playing all the time. Like, I was very physically active and I would not just sit there and sleep for a day. Like, this was uncharacteristic. And I remember her noticing or realizing like what is going on here, And I mean, she already had her intuitive. At this point, she wasn't the monster that she turned into. She had her suspicions about him from the time I was in diapers. I actually have a memory of him abusing me. And like, he always just like, he never took his pants all the way off while he was changing my diaper. He just was like, and I remember one time my mom came in the room because he had the door closed and he had a heart on. And she was like, what are you doing? He's like, nothing. Like, he would always do that, play like the innocent, And she's like, why are you? And she noticed it. She's like, why are you hard? And he was like, oh, I was just thinking about you, And then I remember them, him like making out with her, whatever. Like, I have that memory. So I knew that she already had suspicions about him before she actually knew for sure. She started realizing that something was off. I actually don't think it was the same day she came home. I think it was probably another day at least before she started putting two and two together that something was really off. And he had not come in my room since my mom got home. And like, he was coming in every day to like check the sheets and clean them because I was still bleeding. I bled for probably a week after. They started arguing, so I could hear them. This was a common thing in my household. I could hear them start to argue. I could hear her say this, like, what is wrong with her? Because I think she came in my room and I refused to talk to her. And she's like, what's wrong? Because he had not only threatened me again, but I felt so low. I couldn't even verbalize what had happened to me. There was no way. And she's like, I remember her shaking me and she's like, what happened? Tell me what happened. And like, aggressively. And I'm like, okay, this is not going to help the situation. Like, I'm not going to tell you, so I just ignored her. And so she went back out there and she was like, what is wrong with her? This is not normal. I could hear them screaming. And he was like, nothing. He was like, she's not feeling well or whatever. And then I remember she came back in, turned on the light and threw the sheets back and there was blood everywhere. And she's like, what the, she flipped out. Then he came up with a story about how I was being promiscuous with the neighbor boys. And she eventually bought his story. But like, they were screaming for hours. And she tried to make me get up and I just like crumpled to the floor. And she's like trying to clean the sheets and like take them off the bed. And she's like, what is going on? She's too young to have a first, because like, I think he was trying to say at first that it was my period. And she's like, she's way too young to have a period. This is not right. And then he came up with the neighbor boy's story. And he said that, I think he said something like he had caught me with the neighbor boy. And she eventually bought the story, although she didn't really buy the story. And after this incident, this was the first time that the mind manipulation, mind control, like people talk about the MK Ultra mind control that the CIA is using through our media. It was the same type of thing in my house, but at the time I obviously didn't know about, like, I didn't know any of that, and I didn't know about the MK Ultra stuff until a couple years ago. So I had, up until when was it, 2018, I didn't know about any of that, and I was like deep into my healing work at that point. And I came across, I'll go into that in a different podcast episode. So what happened was, so my mom like didn't fully buy it. Like she was enraged, and she was like, but she would get, that would happen often. She would get enraged, but she wouldn't actually do anything. Like she, as long as he said the right things to her, she would just bury her head in the sand and pretend she didn't know what was going on. But like she knew, you get what I'm saying? But she couldn't, it's like she wanted to pretend that like she couldn't handle it. And it's bullshit. Anybody can handle any difficult situation, if you want to. Like instead, she left me to handle it on my own. She stopped screaming and like started to buy, like, I don't think she fully bought his story, but like, I mean, I wasn't telling her any different. And she was forcefully trying to get me to say, I was so in that dark hole of depression. Like I have never been in a hole like that before. And I have had some like about issues with depression up until, I was probably about 20 or so, and then I started like actually dealing with my stuff, and I healed my depression. I'm not depressed at all anymore, but like at the time it was my first bout with like severe depression. Like I literally was considering killing myself as a 7-year-old because I didn't know what else. I felt like I had no way out. I remember every time in my darkest hours I would pray to God, and I would say, and I don't believe in the Christian God. When I say the word God, I'm not speaking about the Christian God, although I think we're all talking about the same thing. But the interpretation of God, as far as how Christians believe it, I don't agree with that interpretation of what God is. But I use the word because it's familiar to people. So, and it was what was used in my household, even though I wasn't raised Christian. And I would remember turning to God every time, and I remember just being like, is this what my life is going to be? Please, I have to have a reason to live. Like this is sick. Like I knew how wrong it was. And I just remember just like crying, like, just please just let him kill me. Please just let him kill me if this is what my life's going to be like. I can't do it. What happened is that after this experience, because my sister also was hearing this whole argument, like it wasn't like they were trying to hide. They were screaming at the top of their lungs. So, but she was also younger than me. So if I was about 7, she would have been 4. She wouldn't have fully understood what was happening, although maybe she did. If I understood what was happening at the age of 5 myself, maybe she understood. But she never said anything to me. She never said anything comforting. She never. What happened was, I think it was actually either that night or the next day. I remember hearing Rick on the phone, and he was like, almost in a panic. He was like, I have a situation here. And he was talking to what I have now pieced together was somebody from his men's organization or somebody attached to the other pedo rings that were combined kind of with this one. And he's like, I have a situation here, like, I need help. And they sent this like weird nerdy looking guy with, I can't remember if he had glasses or not, but I just remember thinking this guy was super weird, super cold, and if now with looking back on it, he almost seemed like a military, like a 3-letter agency type of like person, but I don't know who he was. I never heard his name. I only know that Rick opened the door, he shook his hand, and he basically, they had us, so they had me, my sister, and my mom. This was the first time this happened. He had me, my sister, and my mom sitting on the floor in a circle, and this guy comes in, and he's doing what I always called hypnotism. This is what I called it before I knew about the MK Ultra stuff. In my own mind, I called it hypnotism because that's the only thing that I could relate it to. And he literally had like a pendulum or some type of a watch, and he was swinging it back and forth. And this, I mean, it went on for hours. Like, this was not a short thing. What I noticed about my mom is that she seemed to have gone through this before, because suddenly my mom wasn't my mom anymore. And it was almost like she was this little girl, and she was like getting a prize at camp. And I remember her sitting like on her knees, and she was like excited, but it wasn't, it was like she was a 7-year-old girl herself. I don't know how else to describe it, but suddenly she was not like a normal person, like my mom. Like, I did not recognize her. And I was like, I remember thinking like, this is fucking weird. Why is she acting like this? And the guy asked, he's like, who wants to go first? And she volunteered. And then I started putting 2 and 2 together, like, she has done this before, but I was not there for it. So, like, her mental fuckery had already started happening probably prior to when I was born. It's almost like this guy, whoever he was, like, I think they said he was a doctor, like a psychiatrist or something. I can't remember what they said he was. But like, as soon as she saw him, she turned into like this good little girl who's like ready to participate and get the gold star. Like, it was bizarre. It was fucking bizarre. And so she went first, and he would say, you know, you didn't see your daughter there was no abuse. Like, he would say things like that. Like, you didn't see blood. You didn't see abuse. And she would repeat it. She'd be like, I didn't see abuse. I didn't, you know, and it went on. And he kept saying the same things. And then he would switch it, and he would say something like, your daughter is promiscuous. She was with the neighbor boy, or something like that, you know, and then she would repeat it. And it was like instilling memories into her brain and removing memories that they didn't want her to remember. But the thing is that you don't really like remove it. It's compartmentalized within the brain. And so, I mean, that went on for like a crazy long time. It was supposed to be working on me and my sister during this whole time. So it wasn't like, and I remember my sister like just participating in it, like, I don't know, she wanted to also. And I knew it was wrong. I knew what they were doing was like completely batshit crazy. So what I did was like, I stated in my mind my intention. I was like, this is not going to work on me. And then during it, so like, I knew that if okay, so like I said, I was very close. I don't know if I said in this podcast, but I was very close to my guides always as a child. I remember asking them, like, what do I do? I don't want to forget my memories, because not as painful as they were, I didn't want to forget. I was adamant that that he was gonna pay for what he did to me. He was not gonna break me. He was never gonna break me. Like, that was from day one. That was like, that actually gave me life. It gave me a reason to live. I was like, he's not gonna fucking break me, and I'm gonna expose him, and I'm gonna expose all these motherfuckers. I'm gonna remember every single one of them. And I remember that. So I remember asking my guides always, because okay, I'll get into that in a minute. I remember asking my guides, like, what do I do? I don't want to forget my memories. And I don't want this to work on me. And they were like, play along, because otherwise they'll kill you. And I said, okay. So I played along. The whole time I was internally fighting what was happening. Like I would verbalize the words, but I wasn't, like, I was adamant and I was holding on to those memories. I would not let them fuck with my mind. And I remembered, I didn't forget. All right, I think I will end it here and I will see you next time.